Welcome to Open Mind Integration. This is Christopher Gunlock, and we're at part 7 of the psychedelic harm reduction class for the rhythms of integration. Check out all 12 classes, openmindintegration.com. Check out the disclaimer, and check out the topics for this class. So, integration, not just integration, but I think the rhythm is really the key part of understanding where integration really starts to manifest in our lives. It's an integration between kind of opposites, different states of consciousness, and obviously psychedelics being a part of helping that along, but really only being part of the story. So we'll get into, what is this dynamic, understanding the rhythm itself, and then how to make it happen. So here I'll give my take on what is psychedelic integration, the big question. Integration can be interpreted in so many ways, so I really would stress that this is my interpretation. Also, I'll just apply the concept of integration to so many different things. I would say the kind of big umbrella here is spiritual integration, or the integration of these expanded states of consciousness. Um, Ultimately, that's kind of really what I think we mean most broadly about the term integration. But when we say psychedelic integration, we're obviously talking about the use of psychedelics and how those states of consciousness can be integrated. But really, this could be integration of your meditation practice or integration of your any religious practice, any traditional ritual, the art of ceremony. Integration, though, also of like even non-spiritual things could be integration of just your passions into your life, your desire, your sense of identity. So integration is all of that. Really already feel like I'm saying the word too many times, but um, yeah, we're just kind of weaving things together. We're just creating harmony amongst the seemingly opposite things in life. So this is my little adaptation of a famous meme out there. Um, both of these are where a lot of psychedelic trippers find themselves on a high enough dose. But they're kind of two sides of the same coin, though. One's maybe how we perceive ourselves, but one's from the external standpoint, it's not the same thing. And so bringing these together somehow so that who you are on the outside is also how you feel on the inside, then there you go. You're integrated. And that can mean a lot of different things depending on what you want to integrate, though. Like some people are perfectly fine not taking psychedelics, not pursuing any kind of spiritual practice or expanded states of consciousness. And yeah, they're probably pretty well integrated, but it's sort of this expanded range of integration that especially psychedelics really challenge us to do. But I think again, in general, this consciousness expansion, spiritual evolution, um, that's what this is getting at. So there is a way. There is a way. It's not easy, but rightfully so. This is kind of the big challenge. It's the Holy Grail. If you can both be Jesus and like not look like a crazy person, yeah, there you go. And maybe that's why folks like Jesus were so famous because they had it integrated somehow. But yeah, even then, yeah, some people didn't perceive Jesus the maybe way he wanted him to. But I suppose that probably goes for anybody, so you can only integrate so much. But yeah, we'll see how good we can do on this. So this is my way of explaining what aspects of a person's life are we actually integrating. Call these the elements of integration. You can think of it in kind of four groups here, although there's definitely some overlap. But health, work, relationships, environment. You can think of each of these as kind of the tangible material aspects of your life, right? Like generally concerning the external world and your physical body, but then your experience of it, obviously, and integrating these expanded parts of ourselves, these expanded awareness and understanding into these aspects of our lives. It looks like basically just creating harmony where there is disharmony, finding those areas that are kind of sucking the life out of you, or creating a blockage, or creating stagnancy. Those are the signs of lack of integration. Anything that is unsustainable, anything that there's like the cyclical destructive pattern to it, that's where to target your integration work. Okay, so but then why? Again, if you're somebody that's not into psychedelics, not into the whole consciousness expansion thing, all that, what's the reason? Well, certainly no reason is fine. But if you do find yourself in a place in life where maybe um, uh, refer to the Elmo meme on this one, you're saying one thing but doing another. A sort of hypocrisy, and people keep kind of noticing that, and there's a bit of tension there. Maybe you're not keeping good friends, or just not feeling generally just kind of the imposter syndrome, or just not feeling like your life is meaningful. And the meaningfulness is really kind of the common theme for a lot of this. The entities, sort of the name they're giving to like a higher form of consciousness or whatever, like a more expanded view of the universe, and you not integrating the lessons. Yeah, when you come back to it, it's hard, right? Like if you like doing psychedelics but you're not doing the integrating, eventually it kind of catches up with you, and you start to really become aware of what you're not integrating, and it gets hard to look at. Yeah, people will do incredible things to selectively integrate and to not look at the things that they've not been paying attention to. Um, and yeah, that's the meme on the left is saying basically the same thing, like thinking that just more medicine, more psychedelics is going to solve your problems. Meanwhile, you've got your demons crawling after you all the time. Your shadows lurking and pulling the strings from the darkness. And those are signs. Yeah, maybe it's time to do some integration. So I get into this concept, the entropy spectrum, or the spectrum in general, in another class. I believe it's the psychedelic psychology. But this is just in a broad sense, more just from a perspective of consciousness. What types of thoughts do you have? The open mind then is a way of describing, representing these expanded states of consciousness, where you go on psychedelics, a kind of spiritual view of things. And these are sort of the qualities of that on the extreme end of that side of the spectrum: immaterial, novel, spontaneous, abstract, holistic. And then the other end of the spectrum, you can think of the parts of your mind that are rational. They're discerning, they're material, predictiveness in general, anticipation, expectation, is generally through linear time, and focus. Precision is really kind of the thing for the limiting mind. And again, check out part 4, psychedelic psychology, to go a little deeper into the Freudian concept of the ego. But just here as a little reminder, this is our mask, our default self, the self that other people can view, or the self that we want other people to view. It's really everything: your beliefs, habits, perceptions, behaviors. So what's the deal with this? Well, this is very representative of the aspects of ourselves that we need to integrate. And you can see this spiraling out of control, and getting further, or you can think of it as like further dissociated from your expanded sense of self, your bigger sense of self. through this cycle of, experiencing some kind of trauma, basically anything that really pushes your buttons, makes you feel uncomfortable or scared or anything like that. And you naturally respond with a coping mechanism, right, to dampen the discomfort, or to cover it up, or to distract from it. And if you do this long enough, and that's kind of the key thing here, is the chronic cyclical nature of this. If it happens long enough, eventually your ego mindset is adapted to it. Your mask takes on the coping mechanism as its identity. And the longer you do this, the more it sticks. But there is inevitably going to be a moment where it gets challenged again, because life is not static. Keeping the same mask on forever is not how life around you goes. Life around you is constantly changing. You can't stop that. And if your mask stays the same, then eventually you'll hit a wall. You'll get slapped in the face. And that's just another trauma, right? And that trauma, you have a coping mechanism again. The key thing in here, though, is if you keep using the same coping mechanism, or ones that just take you deeper into that dissociated state of disintegration, well, that's when you start to spiral out. So we're going to do a little activity for this next part of the class. I want you to go grab a pen and paper or something to type with, and consider for a moment your most ego-challenging experience. So what is an ego-challenging experience? Well, it might be something positive, might be caused by a major accomplishment, a grand mystical experience, liberation from limiting circumstances, an experience of expanded connection, of unity, or just something extremely novel and beautiful that you've never seen before. But also could be a negative experience, might be a major failure, could be something extremely painful, great suffering from abuse of some sort, a great loss, especially of a loved one. Loss in general, though, too, can be anything. Triggering event, something that triggers a past trauma, anything that makes you feel threatened, especially if your life is threatened, or extreme stress, especially something prolonged. So just think to yourself, one of each of these, ideally. What was a moment that really, really pushed your limits, both a positive and a negative way? And just pick one, write a couple things down. So now under each of those ego-challenging events, the positive one and the negative one, see if you can remember, how did you react? What was the response? Was it in a direction of more connection or more disconnection? And keep in mind, this can happen for either one of those ego-challenging events, whether it be like a positive one or a negative one. It can go both ways still. Sometimes we can react with more disconnection when we have, even a beautiful, wonderful, positive experience that challenges our perceptions enough to where maybe we don't want to believe it. So keep in mind, could be in the direction of connection, awe, inspiration, joy, love, courage, acceptance, meaningfulness. Meaningfulness being the big one there. That's kind of what it's the glue that puts it all together, and ultimately, hopefully, comes about as a sense of purpose. But it may also result in denial, fear, distraction, apathy, guilt, rage, and shame. And there's evolutions of that. It's especially when it's a familiar response, when we're already a few notches down the spiral, right? We can get used to it. It can feel like even a sense of identity of, this is just who I am and how the world works, right? And yeah, those can be more stubborn parts of ourselves to move through. So now for each of the reactions to both the positive and negative event, the ego challenging event, think about how those responses evolved into, over time, if it's stuck, your identity. Your identity being how you view your health, your body, your mind, your career, your work, occupation, your relationships, family, friends, loved ones, your environment, the community around you, the place you, like the literal physical place you live, the places you go. How did those things maybe change after that big ego challenging moment? And reflect on the reaction, how it fed into it, how it may have defined it. So if the reaction to that ego challenging event was through more disconnection, then this unfolding where it translates into your identity and then parts of your life that define your identity, it creates certain problems in your life. So by now you might be seeing the connection here, right? Looping this all together, seeing the big picture, zooming out, we see that if we react from a place of disconnection, denial, escapism, fear, meaninglessness, guilt, shame, rage, it reinforces who we believe we are. And that defines itself in every aspect of our external life. Work, relationships, environment, our health. And again, ultimately, you're going to be challenged again. This cyclical nature, the ego reinforces itself, defends itself, protects itself. But by doing so, life changing around you, it manifests, it gets reflected. We start to see these destructive cycles play itself out in front of us. And, maybe we get to a point where we feel like we're just trapped in this never-ending hell. And that can then lead to a sense of meaninglessness, lack of purpose, there's no point. And then ultimately, you'll see it in your body, your mind, the way things function, the vitality starts to slip away. Now, if this ego challenging event causes us to experience more connection, well, here we have a different formula. So now this self-perpetuating cycle that incorporates experiences of more connection creates growth. This is where we're moving through our lives in a way that is reinforcing an evolution rather than a stagnation or a kind of spiraling downwards. And this is really kind of the recipe for healthy psychedelic experiences and healthy psychedelic integration. That experience of greater connection and the contrast then when you take psychedelics into conditions that are traumatizing and there's no support there's no stability, nothing to give you that sense of connection. You do the opposite. You disconnect. And then once you're coming back to those ego moments, those ego processes, well, then, you're reinforcing more of the disconnection and your life will start to reflect that. So I'm bringing this slide back from the psychedelic psychology class because now you can see in more detail what happens when we allow this dynamic of the kind of the basis of your mind, all of the raw material, the raw data from your emotions, your memories, everything going on under the surface, and letting some of that come out to the surface. That's what provides the opportunity to integrate. And so this is where we start to see the rhythm, where we allow ourselves to go to a place where the ego can be challenged, but take a step back so we can see the bigger picture and then go back to it. So when you look at this rhythm over time, we start to see that it's actually weaving itself closer together. These two opposite seeming states, the open mind state, the ego mind state, this expanded state, the more limited singular identity state. We start to see that, they're not really so different after all. And as time passes, as we do more integration in our life, as we challenge our ego more, and as we allow ourselves to see the bigger picture, we go back and forth here. Eventually, they start to come together. They don't seem so disconnected, so dissociated. And this is what I propose as really the point of integration and the mechanism, how we get there. It's a rhythm. You have to have both. So this little graphic, just for visual learners, is representing that, again, that more broad understanding of spiritual integration. For some reason, I'm representing the kind of our material existences using three computers at the same time, but you know what I mean? Like it's just all the external aspects of life that need to be integrated into this subjective sense of being of who we are and what the world is around us. So now let's look at what's happening between these two opposing phases of your egoic self and your non-egoic self. Well, we've got two more phases, creating and integrating. So let's just start at the top here, releasing the ego. As I always say, psychedelics is just one way to do this. There's all kinds of ways out there, and this goes back millennia, ancient practices really got this down. So just pick one or, pick a few, overlap them, layer them. Personalize the method. This is your most personal, sacred, subjective experience. It's kind of the ultimate subjective experience. You get to be you to the maximum degree here. So, take your time with it, plan it out, especially if you're going to be taking some strong medicines with it. I go over this stuff in other classes a lot more, setting in psychedelics, sitters, guides, and facilitators. Definitely check out the other classes. So we call this the release phase for a reason. This is the time to let go. To let go of the illusion that we actually have control over this crazy thing we call life. But that's okay to believe that you do have control. That's the other part of this cycle here. But in this particular phase, that's when we go back. We go back to the place where we don't need to control anything, where just being, just existing is enough. And that is truly the healing moment. I believe very much that at the basis of these chronic mental illnesses, it's just that disconnection. Because the reality is a lot of the folks that are coming into the world of psychedelics or similar types of modalities, it's because they've been on that downward spiral where they responded to an ego challenging event, a trauma, with disconnection, guilt, shame, anger, fear, all that. And then that led their lives to go down a certain trajectory, which, kept reinforcing that. And yeah, you do that long enough, you forget where all that fits. You forget that there's something beyond just this constant ego reinforcing experience. And that is the beautiful gift that things like psychedelics have to offer. So the next phase, once you've released the ego through whatever modality, now you're in it, right? Or maybe trying to get there. So now is the time to create, to express, to get whatever is down in there and bring it out into manifestation, create something meaningful. So the way this looks is as unique as each and every one of us. I promise you, I've been around enough people on psychedelics that I know to never expect to know what's going to happen. Everyone truly is their own magical little creature, and the way it comes out, you never know. You never know. It's just who they are. And so just do something, let it out, something. Maybe it's just moving, right? Or maybe it's talking, or maybe it's just a feeling moves through you. But yeah, getting it out, expressing it makes it real. It makes it brings it into creation. And that's a critical part of moving on to incorporate that into your sense of identity and then your lifestyle and everything that you manifest. So this phase is your ego challenging moment. This is whether you plan it out or not, whether you're taking psychedelics or not, it will happen. It's those moments when that mask that you're wearing all of a sudden is slamming up against, just conflict. It's creating problems in your life. If it's a heavy enough slam, yeah, it can whack you right out of your ego, and that just is going to happen. It's just nice with psychedelics because then you can kind of plan it out ahead of time and you can do it in a way that would be more conducive to having a sense of connection and then going through a healing process. And part of that process is then inevitably to make sure you are having that ego challenging moment. And when it's a psychedelic experience that you planned ahead of time, that's actually often the harder thing to do. And sometimes we resist it so much that we don't actually get to that moment of challenging our egos, and then it's just we just it's like, oh, interesting experience, but I'm not like a changed person or anything. And so this is really the mechanism. You got to have those big boom ahas, like, holy crap, wow, I did not realize, I didn't see it that way before. And that's the moments where you're connecting the neurons, you're building new pathways, you're really stepping outside of who you thought you were. And then you got the opportunity there. So a lot of ways to do this. Guided experience is definitely one. It doesn't have to be that way. A lot of times it just happens, especially these more traditional medicines, the mushrooms and the ayahuasca. They do tend to bring this about whether you like it or not. But still, I mean, a strong mind, real stubborn person can still fight it. I've seen it, and it's unfortunate. So if you're that type of person, yeah, make this happen. Make this happen. And yeah, it's notable to point out, yeah, this is kind of the core tenet of exposure therapy, and a very controversial thing outside of the realm of psychedelics, I think, because what you have to do to put someone in a position where they're exposed to the thing that triggers them, yeah, it can be real messy. But with psychedelics, you can have the internal vision. You can like see holographically, that thing about you. So it's actually like kind of a dream method for this type of therapy. But don't forget to make it playful though too. Play it's not just to kind of pacify the challenge of it, but play is actually critical so that you don't dip into those reactions that create disconnection. Because you want to challenge yourself, you want to push yourself, but not to the extent that you recoil and put up the walls and pull out. And that's kind of what the art of play is describing. It's putting yourself in a challenging situation, but a knowingness that you trust that you're not going to actually be hurt. And that's again the beauty of psychedelics is the psychedelics are not actually the danger. It's you resisting them that's the danger. It's you fighting it. That's what creates the trauma. And that's why we always harp on and on about surrendering to the experience and letting go. Because if you don't trust it, yeah, it's not going to work out. So this is huge, implicating tons of chronic mental illness. And there's a lot showing that when the nervous system is stuck in like that fight or flight mode and you're never getting out of, this is PTSD essentially, chronic anxiety. you lose the ability to be flexible and to even uh, entertain the idea that you could engage in some sort of safe, playful experience. Anytime you put in that challenging position, this kind of person would put the defenses on, put up the walls. It can go the other way around though too. If someone avoids the fight or flight mode, keeps the nervous system in the like passive state, by avoiding conflict, and it's the same thing. It's just coming at it from the different end of it, and that's more where you get your addiction and your depression, where you're just kind of numbed out all the time. So a lot of ways to do this. This is where, especially while you're in the psychedelic state, things get really, really touchy, and you need somebody that really understands how to do this in a safe way. Someone with a lot of integrity too. Your psychedelic guides and therapists and your shamans and facilitators, they are critical in this. If they're not really acting in a way that can be trusted, then yeah, you could be in a lot of trouble. So real careful with this one. So here I've been arguing that in these expanded states of consciousness where we're creating meaning, we have to have some sort of intentional process going on. Just simply being in this state is not necessarily enough, because the ego fights back. The mind, the rational mind, tries to stay in control. And that's where these layering of practices becomes really effective. We bring in the art of play. We challenge the ego. We go to those places that are dormant and repressed. But there's a dose dependency here. When you are working with lower doses, the mind is more likely to fight back. Higher doses, though, I mean, still there can be some fight, and depends on the person. Like I said, I've seen people on 10 grams of mushrooms; they're fighting like hell. And so just be aware, especially with the microdosing, the low dosing. If that's all you're doing, and you're not layering in some sort of therapeutic method or some mindfulness practice, very unlikely that you'll get any really meaningful change out of that. So yeah, just be aware. But inevitably, we have to return, right? The ego always comes back. And sometimes it's hard to accept that, especially if you have a really great experience, or you're really into psychedelics or spirituality or something like that. This phase can sometimes actually be overlooked, to be honest, surprisingly so. But it's just as valuable. I create this rhythm here, the ego rhythm, to show that each of these phases are equally important. And if we miss or skip any one of these, you lose the effect, or you could go down a bad path. So anybody that's had a really strong psychedelic experience or something like that, we found ourselves in a similar place, a crossroads, right? Okay, well, I see now why, I'm addicted to drinking, and why I'm so mean to my friends, and why I can't hold a job. What now? know? Well, first of all, chill out. Take a breather. If you burn out at this point, if you try to stay up all night, go hard, just not slowing down, um, yeah, it's gonna bite you in the butt. So number one thing, recuperate, get the body back into shape. Rest, sleep. Oh, for God's sake, sleep. Get some good food in you. Be good to yourself. Don't try to jump on that bandwagon immediately. You have time. Trust me. The neuroplasticity lingers. Another good thing, talk to somebody. Yeah, somebody you trust. Get it out, right? Tell your story, or just write it down. The vulnerability is kind of the key here, staying open as long as you can. That's going to allow yourself to integrate more, because the ego comes back, and eventually you'll close up again, and those coping mechanisms will fall back into place. And so if you can stay in that vulnerable place a little longer, there's more likelihood that you'll be able to take some action into those new pathways of your life, new pathways of thinking and doing. Setting goals can be nice here. I would take a little bit of time with this. If you try to set your goals too soon, yeah, you might still be kind of in that expanded state. It might be a little hard to kind of ground them into reality. But it's okay. Just keep in mind that as you kind of realize the real obstacles to things, sometimes those goals will get a little refined. But yeah, and that goes with making plans. Again, don't do anything super drastic. Don't buy a plane ticket, hours after your ayahuasca ceremony, or don't go and I don't know, or something, negative, like break up with your girlfriend or something. Give it a day or two at least. That's enough time to kind of recuperate again, get your rest in, bring your body back into shape, and then find some solid ground there, and then start taking action. So this is a feature more common to psychedelics as opposed to other methods of dissolving the ego. Simply just because of how powerful it can and rapid it can change your sense of perception. So we need to be careful. And this is really why we do the preparation, and why we're careful about set and setting and the dose, and all these things help to make it more likely that we'll trust it and that we'll take it seriously. But even so, we're talking experiences that can take you so far that when you come back to the ego, yeah, it can be hard to believe that it was real, or certain parts of it were. So again, take your time with it. The further you go, the more you have to integrate. And and that's also generally why I kind of suggest to people maybe don't take more than you can integrate, and why I urge people to go through this, what I call a pre-integration process, which is a lot of what this class is essentially doing, is looking ahead, seeing what are those aspects of your unconscious that might come to the surface, and how would that maybe affect tangible things in your life, your relationships, work, your environment, and your health. So that process, you can start to already work things, create some wiggle room, create some flexibility, so that your world coming back to the ego isn't such a slap in the face, and because it can be hard to understand, and once the ego comes back, that's when we start, the skepticism and the doubt and the fear start to creep in, and that's when also our interpretation of the experience may be a little tainted as well. So don't always expect to have the clear picture right after the experience. This takes time sometimes. It really does. It takes some time to unfold, and for life to kind of respond back to you. But nonetheless, again, there's something real there. It's just there's so many layers of our perception that can color what it really is, and so there's a lot of trust that happens. So yeah, just keep an eye out for these defense mechanisms popping back. I've said before that the ego comes back, and sometimes it comes back with a vengeance, right? I mean, we just put ourselves through something challenging. That was your kind of pre-planned ego challenging experience, and as with any ego challenging experience, there's going to be a response, a reaction. And is that reaction to disconnect more, to escape, to isolate, to bypass, or are we going the other direction? Do we want to reconnect? Do we want to grow? Do we want to heal? So yeah, beware. Many times I've come back from a great experience with psychedelics, but fall back into the addictive patterns. The numbing, the distracting, and what's even worse here is you can dig yourself even deeper. As we talked about previously in these bigger cycles of our ego challenging moments and the responses to them, and then the way it defines our sense of identity. psychedelics can put you down that spiral faster than anything. You keep doing it, but you keep coming back to the same things. It's gonna like drill you in further, so it's harder to get out. So yeah, beware, especially those higher doses. The higher dose, the more integration that's gonna happen, whether you like it or not. And then we finally get to the phase of integration. So what are we really integrating here? Well, think back to the create meaning phase when you were, on psychedelics or otherwise somehow released of your ego. And what came out? What was expressed? What was all that like raw data that was under the surface coming out? And so take that and turn it into lessons, into goals, new habits, new ways of looking at things, letting go of certain things, challenging the preconceived notions, and changing what's around you. And so how do we do that? The four elements of integration: health, work, relationships, environment. So by health, I'm talking very broadly, essentially the body, the mind, everything involved in that. And some nice points to consider in a broad sense is resilience. Stress is ultimately the thing that's underlying trauma and those ego challenging events. It's stressful, right? And when we have low resilience to stress, we're more likely to respond with that disconnection, the fear, the escape, the apathy, guilt, shame, all of that. So yeah, building that up, key. Contraindicated medications. So unfortunately, what I'm talking about is psychiatric meds. They have a place in the treatment of illnesses. But if we depend on them too much as just a band-aid, then we essentially weaken our ability to adapt, to change. It disincentivizes the need to change, whether for better or worse. So something to keep in mind for sure. And also interesting that psychedelics very often don't mix well with these types of medications. Trauma suppressed sensitivity. So this is a big issue for folks coming into the world of psychedelics, finding that their psychedelic experiences are not so much like the ones that they've heard on TV and the ones that their friends have told them about. I have met people take 10 grams of mushrooms and have barely but a glimmer of that mystical visionary experience. And the correlation here, yeah, is when a person is put through enough pain, especially chronic trauma, the body protects itself. Not just the mind, but the body. It literally dumps endogenous opioids into the system so that you don't have to feel, so that you don't have to experience or even be aware of that, all that suffering. And while psychedelics can, help a person experience more, the body, the mind is far more powerful. There you have to ease into it sometimes. Just pumping a person full of psychedelics it's not always the way to go here. So it's something to keep in mind. Digestive issues. This is a big deal for anything that you take through the mouth, right? Anything that has to go through the gut. Oftentimes people have to work through those, especially with something like ayahuasca or mushrooms. It'll show you pretty quick if you got some digestive issues going on. So that can be a good reason to, do the preparation, do the dietas, maybe take some other kind of detox protocols and things like that. So work is an element of stability in people's lives. It's for prosperity as well, but at the very least, stability is a big concern when you're on this path of integration. Financial security, money, Understanding your relationship with that. Sometimes it's actually our own kind of internal subjective resistances that get in the way of prosperity. It's not always external circumstances. Time and energy management, this is just basic productivity, right? We live in a world of an attention economy where it's constantly being stolen from us, and it's very hard to get stuff done when your attention is being hijacked by your smartphone. Behavioral expectations, work, there's a certain culture around that. There's a certain way of getting along with other people. Some people it's more solo, but inevitably, work, you're going to interact with folks in some sort of way. Value systems, right? The work really challenges, especially when money's involved. It challenges our value systems, and I think it can be in a very positive way. I think without that, that hustle and grind, a person's value system may not really develop to a full enough extent. Because if you have everything given to you, you never have to work. You never understand the dynamics of the give and the take. The buy and the sell, the good times and bad times, right? So all very, very integral to our full experience of who we are. So this is a big one. Obviously, I work with my clientele on these pretty extensively. People, they tug on our heartstrings. I mean, they're involved in everything, though. Really, truly. I mean, this is one that you can't separate from any of the others by any means. So obviously, intimacy and love. The need for touch and closeness and someone to see you, to recognize you, huge, huge. Supportive family and friends. Family is everything, right? Integrating into family has enormous benefits. For some people, it's not quite possible, and that's okay. But you do what you can. You really, the more the merrier on that one. Community engagement. So this is your kind of your extended family, right? Your big sense of belonging. And then even from a bigger standpoint, culture, religion, anything that brings people together around a certain mindset, certain way of perceiving the world. And the environment. So this one pervades everything. You're always in an environment. So think in terms of specifics here. Your home being kind of the number one thing, where you spend the most time, where you rest your head, where you eat your meals, where you raise a family. Basic survival needs going to be a big one on this. Just having enough. Being secure. Location specific stresses, where you live geographically, where you live in terms of the surrounding areas, what kind of community you live in has a huge impact on your lifestyle. So in my opinion, if you're going to do just one thing to start your integration process, do this. Find a community, find people. This is what provides opportunities and doors into everything else. Be able to find better ways to take care of your body, relationships, obviously, opportunities to be in different environments, and for your career, your well-being, financial security. Community provides. So it's important to find one that is in alignment with this path of growth you're on. Maybe it's a spiritual path. In general, you may start to notice, especially after you start doing psychedelics, the difference between people that are living to grow and are living to just pull out, numb out, to escape. So yeah, huge. And this is just a little diagram I made that I thought throwing in there to inspire folks to realize that, if you are pursuing psychedelics, that it's a big world. It's blowing up. It's a revolution for sure. So there's a lot of ways to find community, to integrate into career and relationships and all that. So it's a good time to get in on it. So here we are, another class finish. Well done. This was an important one. I hope to see folks revisiting this one too, because I think every time you go through that cycle, that ego rhythm, you may need reminders that it was real, it was meaningful, and that there's a time to create meaning, there's a time to integrate meaning, and that coming back to the ego is okay. It's all part of the process. It's a never-ending challenge, but it's kind of the challenge. It's the one that we're going to go through one way or another, right? Life is going to throw these curveballs at us. It's going to force us to adapt and change and to grow. The only question is how we respond to that. So psychedelics is kind of like practicing, but also you can be extremely productive with it. So thank you for listening. And there's a ton more awesome content in the psychedelic harm reduction course, 12 classes altogether, each one designed to offer some really in-depth practical education on how to reduce your risks, maximize your benefits. And you can view all the slides for every class for free at openmindintegration.com. And there's a bunch of other educational content up there as well. And my personal services, of course, for people going through preparation and integration processes. Here to help folks go a little deeper, be a little safer about it. So please let me know. Thank you.